2 weeks. Good afternoon, everyone. It's 5 o'clock, time to get down to business. I will call the council meeting for Monday, February 24, 2020 to order. Today we acknowledge that this event is taking place on the traditional territory of the Indigenous peoples of Turtle Island, including the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Ojibwe peoples, and on lands connected with the Lake Simcoe Nottawasaga Treaty of 1818. This is the home of a diverse range of Indigenous peoples whom we recognize as contemporary stewards of the land and vital contributors of our society. And I'll look to the Deputy Mayor for the adoption of the agenda motion.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. It's moved by me and seconded by Councillor Doherty. Be it resolved that the content of the Council agenda for February 24th, 2020 be adopted as presented.
Thank you very much. I'll call the vote. All in favor? That is carried unanimously. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, if you find yourself in that situation as we work through the agenda, please let me know. Adoption of minutes. Councillor McLeod.
Moved by me and seconded by Councillor Madigan. Be it resolved that the minutes of the council meeting held February 18, 2020 be approved as presented.
Thank you. Council, any errors or omissions? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All in favor? That is carried unanimously. And is there any business arriving from the previous minutes? Seeing none, then we will get into community announcements. And before we get going too far, I'm going to kick it off because this is a very exciting one. On behalf of our CAO, he welcomed in his second grandchild into the world today. Yahya, which is Arabic for John, was born at 4:31 a.m. at 7 pounds 11 ounces. So congratulations, and apparently according to custom you pass out sweets, so there's 9 IOUs around the table here. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. 2 announcements, both related to the county, if I may. The first one is for a workshop that is on Wednesday, March the 4th, and I'll just read it if I may. It's the Empower Simcoe Housing First Program Landlord Information Forum is coming to Collingwood, Wednesday, March the 4th from 6 to 8 p.m. at 485 2nd Street here in town. The Simcoe County Regional Housing First Program, our Simcoe Housing First Program, register here. And the website, and I'll pass this along to our staff so that we could include this in communication, is empowersimcoe.ca. And the purpose of the program is simply to educate landlords on the opportunity of working with this organization to provide affordable below market rents to those within our community. So again, Wednesday, March the 4th from 6 to 8. For those who are not familiar, 485 2nd Street, that is the address of one of the 2 buildings at the corner of 2nd and High, and we have county offices located there. The other, and I promise this will be my last, garbage, recycling, whatever you want to call it, announcement, but if you didn't, I hope you did, but within our mail, each resident should have received a flyer, 1-page 8.5 by 11 flyer. On the back was a 1 free blue bin coupon that you could redeem at the 10th line or any other county waste facility for an extra blue bin. I have it on good authority that not many residents have taken us up on this opportunity. So if you are out there and you don't have a coupon, I would simply say that you're there on good word from the mayor that he could provide you with a free bin. And if they can't, it's your problem, not mine.
And the Deputy Mayor has a big baseball bat.
That's right. So anyways, I think we all know that the program has now been into week 3, week 4 of our alternating collection cycle. Today was recycles and green bin, and if you feel that you need additional resources, by all means reach out to the 10th line and you can pick up a bin for free there. And those are my 2 announcements. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor McLeod.
I'd like to express my gratitude to the Deputy Mayor for that information. I recycled my coupon, and so I will be taking him up on that. And that's all I have to say. That's all.
There he goes. No good coupon goes unpunished. Councillor Comey.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. 2 announcements related to International Women's Day. The first is the flag raising, which will be on Thursday, March the 5th at 1 p.m. in front of the library. where my friend's house will be on hand, and there'll be many exciting activities. Please join us. And the second is going to be our panel discussion on Sunday, March the 8th at 2 p.m. at the Simcoe Street Theatre, which is offering a wonderful panel this year, including Carolyn Wilson, Jen Martin, Catherine Giles, Asha Frost, and moderated by Catherine Thompson. It's a wonderful event. It is ticketed $15, and that includes some catering from the Lowdown. So we hope to see you there. Thank you.
Councillor Matty.
Well, I had two announcements, but you took one. Thank you for that. Exciting news from our Collingwood Clippers. I believe this weekend, the 13-year-old Piper Mitchell won gold in the 200-meter backstroke. So that's fantastic for her to bring that home. And then a young man named Liam Patterson won 2 gold at 10 and under. And they're both ranked in top 5 in Canada in their events. So congrats to them on all their training at our wonderful pool here in Collingwood. And thanks for the continued success of the Collingwood Clippers and all the parent volunteers. It's fantastic what they do for our community, and we really appreciate it, even when they don't bring home gold. Congratulations.
Just getting to the pool at 5:30 in the morning is a win.
Yes.
Councillor Doherty.
I have nothing this evening, Your Worship.
Councillor Berman. Nothing. Councillor Jeffrey.
Nothing this evening, Mayor Saunderson.
Councillor Henry.
Trifecta, nothing for me.
We are on the fast route. And I had my one public announcement, so, and I'm glad I got in there early. So that said then, we don't have any public meetings today. We're on to deputations, and we have with us Trevor Henson, who's been the main force behind the anti-bullying Pink Shirt Day and awareness, and that's coming up on February 26th. So Trevor, welcome. You have 10 minutes and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor, Council, and members of the media. My name is Trevor, as you already know, and our message is to clearly say stop bullying. Bullying happens on the streets, online. So what we at the club are going to be doing is decorating some poles to lead towards the library. So that way on February the 26th, 2020, 11 a.m. our flag will be raised to honor those people who have been bullied and then say stop. As well as we got a windowsill right downtown. It looks gorgeous. Thank you to those people that helped, as well as Jen, our person that's behind me. She was our go-to person, and as John Gabriel as well. So thank you, Council, and please be kind and courteous and stop the bullying. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Trevor. We all look forward to February 26th and to raising that great flag. Council, any comments or questions for Trevor before he leaves? He's been so concise. No, thanks very much, Trevor. We look forward to Feb 26th. Consent agenda. Who would have that?
That'd be me, Mr. Mayor. We really are clipping right along. Okay. Moved by me and seconded by Councillor Jeffrey. Be it resolved that the general consent agenda, having been given due consideration by Council, be received. And those are items 8.1 through 8.5, and that includes our Women's Day proclamation.
Thank you. And is there, I guess I'll call the vote first, just receive the items and then give you an opportunity to pull them. 8.5 does have a motion attached, and I believe you have that as well, Councillor Conley. So all in favor of receiving the consent agenda? That is carried unanimously. Are there any items that anybody wishes to pull? Seeing none, then let's get to the motion for 8.5, Hospice Georgian Triangle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moved by me, seconded by Councillor Jeffrey. Be it resolved that Council approve the request of Hospice Georgian Triangle for a partial closure of St. Marie Street South parking lot and waive the fees outlined in the fees and service charges bylaw applicable to the partial closure.
Any questions or comments, Council, before I call the vote? Seeing none, all in favor? That is carried unanimously. Item 9, reports, minutes of other committees or boards. Who would have that?
Mayor Saunders.
Councillor Berman.
Moved by me, seconded by Councillor Madigan, be it resolved that the minutes of the following boards are hereby received and recommendations contained therein be approved. 9.1, Collingwood Public Library Board meeting minutes, January 23rd, 2020, and 9.2, Collingwood Police Services Board joint meeting minutes, December 11th, 2019.
All right, I will call the vote to receive, and then if anyone has any comments or questions, they can raise them after. So all in favor of receiving, that is carried unanimously. Thank you. Any questions or comments arising from the items? Councillor McLeod.
Regarding item 9.2 in the Police Services Board, I read with interest that the mayor suggested during the joint meeting of the Police Services Boards that the so-called heat map being created by the OPP be made available once it is available. And I wonder if we might want to be sure that that information also makes it to the staff members who are working on our traffic calming study, which is due in the third quarter of this year. I'm not sure to whom to direct that question.
Going to put that through to John Bellick. John, has staff received a copy of the heat map from the police?
Through the mayor, we received a copy, kind of an unofficial copy. They were making us aware of their suggestion to do the reverse angle parking. I wasn't sure if they were updating. It's not clear to me whether they're updating that map. If they have been updating it since that time, then I do not have a copy of the latest one. I probably have a copy somewhere of the older one.
Well, look for verification from the acting police chair, but I think it was a 3 or 4 year heat map compilation. So, Councillor Jeffrey.
That is correct, Mayor Saunderson, and also I believe it was forwarded out to all of council at Councillor Hamlin's request, and a copy did go to the Executive Director, Skinner, for staff use, so we just need to connect them.
That's this.
I have not received a copy of that I am aware of. However, I will go back in my emails and look, and thank you.
Thank you. And that brings us to item 10. Oops, sorry. Councillor Doherty.
Thank you. Just in regard to the Police Service Board minutes, I just was going to ask, has there been consideration, this was a joint Police Service Board meeting, has there been consideration to combining the two boards in that they are overseeing one service? And with the province looking for efficiencies and economies of scale, I'm just wondering if that might be one of them, to combine the two police service boards to one.
So under the current structure, they're separate contracts, and we are in separate counties. The County of Simcoe has asked as part of its governance review to look at one single contract or negotiation county-wide, which would be the 16 municipalities in Simcoe. With respect to the costing arrangements, how the contract works, there's a set fee that is consistent for all municipalities based on population, and then there's a separate fee that's based on the number of calls. So those are done independently, but the calculations for the fees are done on the same math. So I'm not sure that there would be any efficiencies to be found in the end result, but it's certainly something that the County of Simcoe is looking at for the 16 municipalities, because we're in 2 different counties. That conversation hasn't come up, and I'll let the chair comment, but the prime reason for the joint meeting, we have done them in the past, but with the community wellness, well-being metrics being done, we were looking at ways that we could discuss those wellness plans, and again, that's something that's also being looked at by the County of Simcoe too. So it was really, we do this on an annual basis, or have in the past since I've been on the board, just to bring some synergies to the two, because it's one police force serving 2 committees or municipalities. But in terms of the actual contracts, those are negotiated on a municipality by municipality basis. Councillor Jeffrey, do you have anything to add to that?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Saunderson. I'm attending a full-day consult with the OPP in Orillia on Friday, and this is one of the topics for conversation. There are areas in which the combination can work, but I think that you've explained the significant differences in terms of our 2 areas, and that would take a little more discussion by the Police Services Board and with some staff support. But it has come up in the discussions and the consultations with the OPP.
Councillor Doherty.
Thank you. My second question was in regard to the staff report on reverse angle parking for the downtown. And that is actually the second time that I've seen that referenced in the Police Service Board's minutes. And certainly on the surface, it would appear that it would have significant safety benefits for cyclists and for pedestrians. And I'm wondering to that point, can the BIA board be copied with both the heat map and the findings that have led to that proposal?
I would, with the clerk, who's part of that committee, I don't think the information's not public. I would say that the heat map of the accidents is just a compilation of the accident reports over the last 3 to 4 years. I don't know that there was a study done to come up with that, but they looked at it and they made the recommendation that we consider the reverse angle parking as an offshoot to protect against that, and we now have it with our staff, but I don't know that there's any reason why we couldn't make that information available. So, yes.
Thank you. And those are my questions.
All right, Councillor Hammond.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to comment on the first question that Councillor Doherty asked about the Police Services Board, because I am aware in the province, and as I'm sure most are, there are a lot of municipalities that have joint contracts for the OPP to handle their services, and they do have fights from time to time over how to share those costs, but I think with our one neighbour who we're already sharing a police force, there could be some advantages to looking into that further. And I certainly appreciate we're in 2 different counties, but there are more and more, it comes to my mind, that we should be looking carefully at our neighbour, the town of the Blue Mountains, and seeing what we can do together. I worry particularly about our planning and the impact on our traffic. And Highway 26, there's going to be so much development coming, and it's being approved in our town, it's being approved in the town of the Blue Mountains. And I am so afraid we're going to end up with, how do you like this for a crazy example, a Gardner Expressway to handle all the traffic, because we'll have to have 2 levels. So all to say, I would like to encourage in some fashion, if we can, as we move forward, looking more at intergovernmental sharing of things so that we don't end up, in a terrible situation because we forgot to talk to our neighbors. So I'll just leave that now, but I do want to pursue that.
Well, I think you've broached a couple of conversations there. The contract itself is a formulaic, so it doesn't matter if you amassed us together or separately from the town of Blue Mountains. It's going to be the same price. What would change is the variable price, which is on a call basis. In terms of us working together for traffic flow and traffic regulation, that is already underway. That's one of the reasons we have the joint meetings. So I think to the first point, the contract, I don't know that would get us any farther down the road, but certainly we are working in conjunction with our neighbors to make sure that issues like traffic flow, and the study that was produced in Collingwood was also produced to our neighbors up in the town of Blue Mountains. So I think we're operating on that front. Councillor Jeffrey, anything to add?
I would agree.
All right. Okay, well, if we have the motion for the BIA. No, we've got that. So, all right, moving on then, we're now into number 10, Standing Committee Report, Development and Operations Services. Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, Worship. First of all, I have the consent agenda for the committee. Be it resolved that, moved by me and seconded by Councillor Jeffrey, be it resolved that Council receive the Development and Operations Services Standing Committee report from its meeting held February 10th, 2020, and hereby approve the recommendations contained within the report as presented. And there were 8 items, 10.1.1, PW 2020-02, the Huron and Niagara Crosswalk budget request, 10.1.2, PW 2020-03, the annual water compliance report for 2019, PW 2020-05, the Blue Mountain Transit Partner Agreement extension, PW 2020-03, the extension of draft approval for Bridgewater on Georgian Bay Plan of Subdivision, formerly the Preserve at Georgian Bay, P 2020-04, part lot control exemption, 804 here Ontario Street, part lot 678, block F, registered plan 334. And P 2020-05, authorization bylaw to execute an amending site plan control agreement for 2 Mountain Road, Sleep Country in the Blue Mountain Center Plaza, town file D111219. And P 2020-06, part lot control, Riverside Townhouses, Block 9. And finally, 10.1.8, consent items. County of Simcoe re OPA decision for 360 Raglan Street, which was approved by the county.
Thank you, Councillor Doherty. When we call these are consent agenda items, and they've made it on the consent agenda because at the committee level, they were approved unanimously. Before I call the vote to receive and accept the items, if anybody wants to pull an item to have it dealt with separately as opposed to just comment on it, now's your opportunity. Are there any items people would like to pull before I call the full agenda? Councillor Hamlin.
I wanted to speak further, I should say, to item 10.1.4.
Okay, I'll pull that. Any other items? Seeing none, then I'm going to call the vote to receive items 10.1.1, 10.1.2, 10.1.3, 10.1.5, 10.1.6, 10.1.7, and 10.1.8. All in favor? That is passed unanimously. Dealing with 10.1.4, extension of draft approval. Councillor Hamlin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a matter to extend a draft plan of subdivision approval some 13 years old. I spoke to this briefly at committee to say I would support this for 1 more year, and I'm not changing my mind tonight. I do say, however, that anyway, what I wanted to say was I attended a conference since this was at committee, and it made me realize even more how important it will be when the revisions to this draft plan come forward, which I'm expecting we'll see in the next year from the applicant, that we take careful note of the importance of considering whether the roads in subdivisions such as this should be private or public. And as I'm sure we've all noticed, it seems that almost all the developers in our community who are bringing forward applications for attached housing, by that I mean townhouses, seem to think they should be on private roads. And the more I have thought about this, the more I would like to emphasize, particularly with respect to this one and every other one that'll come forward, and I hope we'll have some chance to discuss this at an appropriate time, the importance of having public roads. And I spoke, I believe, at the committee about the cost of it on the individuals who are actually residing in the subdivisions with these private roads. But on that point, I did have an opportunity to ask one of our engineering staff after that meeting who in fact owns the services in those private roads. And as we know, under the pavement part of any road, we're going to see lots of pipes. And one pipe will carry water, one pipe will carry some sewage because it has to go leave the homes. Some other pipes will carry the storm water away. So who owns those pipes? And it turns out the water pipes are owned by the town, but the other pipes are owned by the residents. So not only do they have to pay for their cost of snow plowing, the cost of maintenance of the road, the cost of their garbage pickup, in addition to their taxes, but as those services under the road start to need maintenance and repair, and possibly replacement over time, they're going to have those costs as well. And I predict a tsunami. It'll be past any of our times probably on council, but of homeowners coming to council and asking for these roads to be assumed because of the cost. Now that leads me to this conference I went to. It was a conference having to do with the future of urban transportation.
Sorry,
Yeah.
Councillor Hamlin, we're restricted here to this item, and you're certainly welcome to bring that up under other business.
About the urban transportation and the private roads?
Yeah.
I will.
So bring that up under other business, but for this one, we've taken your concern about the private roads, so I'll call the vote on this item.
Yep.
All in favor? That is approved, thank you very much, unanimous. Councillor Doherty, is there anything else for you under here?
Not on the consent, but I have the bylaws.
Okay, so let's get to the bylaws now, thank you.
Moved by me and seconded by Councillor Jeffrey. Be it resolved that bylaw number 2020-008, being a bylaw to authorize a part lot control exemption to allow for the creation of 2 lots for semi-detached dwelling units at 804 Here Ontario Street, be enacted and passed this 24th day of February 2020.
Thank you. Any comments or questions, council? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All in favor? It's carried unanimously.
Thank you. And the next bylaw?
Yep.
2020-009, being a bylaw to authorize the execution of an amending site plan control agreement for the development of 1 additional commercial retail pad at 2 Mountain Road between Crest Point Real Estate, Blue Mountain Inc., Royal Bank of Canada, and the town of Collingwood, be enacted and passed this 24th day of February 2020.
Comments or questions, council? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All in favor? That's carried unanimously. Councillor Doherty.
Thank you. And the one final, bylaw 2020-010, being a bylaw to authorize a part lot control exemption to allow for the creation of townhouses within Block 9 of the Riverside subdivision, be enacted and passed this 24th day of February 2020, and that's moved by me and seconded by Deputy Mayor Hall.
Thank you. Any questions or comments, council? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All in favor? That is carried unanimously. Staff reports, we have none. Motions, we have none. Bylaws, we've dealt with. Notices of motion. Any notices of motion? Seeing none. County report. Deputy Mayor.
Mayor Saunderson, I didn't have anything really to speak to specifically. The one item that was highlighted at the top of the report that was attached to the minutes, or to the agenda I should say, I spoke to last week with regards to the homelessness prevention system funding, and the fact that we approved 1.2 million for 2020-2021 to assist 30 service providers across the county. I'm happy to answer any questions if any are county relevant.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and I'm sure there'll be a lineup for coupons in the near future for you. And the CAO has just handed me a letter that we received today from Minister Clark announcing we're getting additional funding of 182,000 towards our project managing transformation. So that's an exciting announcement. Thank you for that. So item 16, older deferred business. Is there any older deferred business? That gets us to 16.2, which is other business, and 16.2.1 is the International Women's Day presentation. Councillor Collins. Yvonne's doing it? No, I've got this on the schedule. I will get to Yvonne as I go down. I've got you in my notes, Councillor Hamel. Thank you.
This is a presentation I prepared as an opportunity to contextualize and highlight the significance of International Women's Day coming up on March the 8th. I'd like to start off by thanking all of staff in the Women's Day Committee for their hard work and dedication to honoring this significant day, and to all who volunteered and participated in last year's event, and to those putting so much into this year's. I'd like to thank CAO Amin, who from the first suggestion of having the town recognize the day was highly supportive. Okay, first slide, please. Okay, so just a little bit background and history. International Women's Day began as an offshoot of increased labor unrest in the early 20th century. In Russia during World War I, when more than 2 million Russian soldiers had already perished, women organized a day of protest, going on strike for bread and peace. The first International Women's Day was held on March 19, 1911. It moved to March 8 in 1913, with rallies in Germany, Denmark, Austria, and Switzerland. More than 1 million women and men attended. It was not until 1975, International Women's Year, that the United Nations sanctioned International Women's Day. And there's two pictures on the screen there. Pictured in the upper right is from 1917 Petrograd, from that Bread and Peace demonstration. Revolutionary leader Leon Trotsky wrote, "But we did not imagine that this Women's Day would inaugurate the revolution." 7 days later, Tsar Nicholas II abdicated, and the provisional government granted women the right to vote. Pictured below there are Clara Zetkin and Rosa Luxemburg, who brought forth the idea of an International Women's Day as a way of promoting equal rights, including suffrage. Next slide, please. Okay. This year's theme is Each for Equal. As of 2017, gender equality is the fifth of 17 Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. The World Economic Forum's Global Gender Gap Report estimates it will take 108 years to reach gender parity. The World Bank measured gender discrimination in 187 countries and listed only 6 as giving women equal work rights as men. We have a picture on this slide as well, and it's actually taken from a Guardian article written less than a year ago when the first set of data regarding the internationally agreed upon targets was released. At that time, Melissa Gates stated, quote, it should serve as a wake-up call to the world. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, here in Canada, Canadian women earned an average of 84 cents for every dollar earned by men in 2019. Women make up just over half of the Canadian population, yet only comprise 19.5% of board members for Canada's top 500 companies. In Canada, women occupy 18% of mayor's positions and 28% of councillor seats. And that stat's actually provided by FCM. And the article on the right was published following the last election. In the photo is the mayor of Innisfil, Lynn Dolan, who was one of our panelists at last year's Women's Day event at the suggestion of Councillor Jeffrey, and of course she was fantastic. The article provides a statistic that only 39 of 150 members of council are women for the 2018-22 term in Simcoe County. Collingwood was the only municipality to elect a majority female council. In the article, Mayor Dolan goes on to state, "The incentive is difficult. I missed a lot of soccer. That's something a lot of women aren't willing to do." So of course I had to include that. Okay, next slide please. Here in Collingwood, in 1951, Evelyn Hiscock elected and became first woman councillor. And I have to thank journalist Ian Adams, who wrote about this first woman councillor and was able to provide the statistic with help from our museum. In 1953, Evelyn was acclaimed as Deputy Rev, becoming Simcoe County's first woman councillor. In 2010, Sandra Cooper was elected and becomes the first woman mayor. 2018, 5 women elected, becoming first woman majority council. And in 2019, International Women's Day, we hold our first celebration here in Collingwood. So a couple of things I thought were interesting is that Evelyn decides not to run for re-election in 1954. And in Mr. Adams' article, he says that at the time, she said she would not, quote, blame anyone fearing an election in Collingwood. Quote, it is disgraceful the way in which personalities are flung about, she said. Okay, last slide, please. Okay, there we go. So that was last year's wonderful inaugural celebration for International Women's Day. And this year, as I mentioned at community announcements, we hope you can join us again for 2 events. Thursday, March the 5th at 1 p.m. in front of the library, where we will have our flag raising and some wonderful events. And the second is the actual panel discussion on Women's Day, Sunday, March the 8th at 2 p.m. Tickets are $15 and they're available on Eventbrite. Thank you.
Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. And just to add to Councillor Comey's presentation, I'd like to speak a little bit about FCM's role and what they're doing in Canada and globally. So as more women take on political public leadership roles, we are closer to our goal of more representative, responsive, and effective government at every level. So it's not about being first in any of the categories as a woman achieving things, but it's about leading by example, and it's about leaving a legacy. It's about being supportive of other women, and the focus at FCM is also about diversities that go beyond just gender equality. So some of the programs they have toward parity in municipal politics, they work with partners across Canada to remove barriers in women's participation in politics at the local government level, and I know that I have run a couple of regional campaign schools and trying to share tools and resources with women to help empower them to pursue a political career. They have an inclusive municipal leadership program, which goal is to ensure that citizens elect officials that have more influence over the management of local affairs in 8 Tunisian municipalities. And they also have a sustainable and inclusive communities program in Latin America, which strengthens local governments in Colombia and Peru as they work with the mining sector to create lasting benefits to their community. And so they have projects where they protect women's property rights and holdings and registries, and it's really a very impressive thing that we can celebrate on International Women's Day through FCM. So always very proud to brag on FCM.
Thank you very much. Any comments or questions, Council? Deputy Mayor?
I just wanted to convey my thanks to both Councillor Comey and Councillor Jeffrey for their remarks and for the slide presentation. I just wanted to comment on one perhaps omission, and that was that in 2010, although there were a number of female candidates within that particular election, the municipality from a gender basis took a step back in the fact that we had a council between 10 and 14 that had 8 men around the front of the table, led by one female at the head of the table. But at that time, we had the first female CAO, the only CAO, female CAO within the town, Kim Wingrove, and the vast majority of our leadership team were all female. And that is a trend that continues today. We have a very strong balance in terms of gender within the leadership team that carries on, and we're leaders in that respect.
Deputy Mayor. Anyone else? Thank you very much for the presentation. We're certainly extremely proud of our council with 5 women being trendsetters, but picking up on the Deputy Mayor's comments as well. In the last 2 years, we've had 2 very significant hires. The one promotion from within with the hiring of our Executive Director, Sonia Skinner, and then promoting Peggy Slama to Director of Public Works. So we're extremely well represented, I think, in our workforce here. And I think we can look forward to celebrating many years of being an equal opportunity employer and pushing the equity agenda. And as is indicated in the Sustainable Goal 17, it's an inclusive, safe, and resilient community. So we're looking forward to being all of those things as we push forward. So I look forward to the flag raising and to the event on Sunday. Thank you very much. Any other business? I know I've got you on there as well, Councillor Doherty, and I'm not forgetting about you, Councillor Hammond. Councillor Doherty, you wanted to speak about the AMO waste issues.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. This first meeting for me, which was for the newly formed AMO Waste Management Task Force, was quite an eye-opener. The task force is comprised of elected officials and staff from around the province, representing both upper and lower tier municipalities. Its purpose is to inform AMO's advocacy strategy and positions on waste management policy issues affecting municipal governments, providing a coordinated and integrated approach. The task force will identify potential impacts of provincial legislation and regulations and develop strategic responses and messaging. Information will be fed to the task force from the Municipal 3Rs Collaborative formed in 2017 to work out an on-the-ground implementation plan for the Waste Free Ontario Act, which was passed in November 2016. The 3Rs Collaborative is comprised of waste management staff from around the province, including 2 senior Simcoe County staff. The premise of the Waste Free Ontario Act is to transition the province from a linear economy where resources are manufactured into consumables and byproducts sent to waste, to a circular economy where goods are manufactured, consumed, and then diverted or repurposed rather than simply disposed of as waste. Ontarians generate 12.7 million tons of waste annually, and less than half of this is successfully diverted from landfill. That was a real aha moment for me. 10,000 tons of plastics alone are ending up in the Great Lakes. Local governments are spending roughly $1.2 billion per year to manage household waste across the province. The key provincial strategy will be to move toward full producer responsibility via implementation of the Resource Recovery and Circular Economy Act. And I have some of the timelines outlined for you. The first is already passed, January 1st, 2019, tire regulation came into effect. July 1st, 2020, this year, battery regulation will come into effect. January 1st, 2021 will be electronic and electrical equipment regulation. July 1st, 2021 will be municipal or hazardous and special waste regulation. Then January 2023 will be the target date to have a food and organic waste strategy for green bin municipalities finalized. Finally, in 2025, the blue box transition to full producer responsibility should be complete. The task force acknowledges that this will be a challenging and complex process, and it will proceed toward implementation across the province over 3 years, so roughly a third of the municipalities coming on site. Municipal councils will decide independently, in our case this will be the county, on the best timing for blue box transition based on all operational and financial obligations that need to be changed over. And municipal resolutions, or in our case county, are to be provided before June 30th of this year, ahead of the finalization of the regulation. As the task force and the R3 group have worked through this process, a couple of emerging issues have come to the fore. First of all is recognition of a waste hierarchy that acknowledges that recovery is higher use than recycling or disposal. So this in turn opens up strategies such as deposit return programs, simplification or reduction of packaging, new R&D opportunities for manufacturers to improve packaging, and so on. Secondly, an issue for many municipalities up until now has been the inability to have a say in the siting of landfill facilities. The government is considering a more explicit municipal say in landfill location. The AMO has mixed feelings on that particular policy. However, as time goes by, it will be worked out to the satisfaction of all groups. Another huge issue has emerged around single-use plastics. Right now, there are currently a number of individual municipal councils, including ourselves, that have responded to resident pressures to change the system and are passing resolutions around single-use plastics. What is needed more is a province-wide single-use plastic strategy. And indeed, perhaps this is an area where the federal government should take a lead to facilitate a consistent approach across the country rather than on a municipality by municipality or region by region basis. Finally, government has become highly focused on litter. Litter in parks, in waterways, and more broadly in our communities, because litter is not being captured in any of our current or future diversion strategies. Thus, the province has proclaimed May 12th, 2020 as official day of action on litter, and all municipalities are encouraged to participate. Presently, I'm working with Adam Ferguson and Director Skinner to create a promotion and activity plan for this event in Collingwood. And I will report back to Council in due course on this event and on future meetings of the task force. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Doherty. We look forward to that May 12th initiative. Councillor Hamlin, you've been waiting patiently.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There's actually two things I would like to speak to under other business. The first one, as I mentioned briefly, is a conference I attended in Toronto a few weeks ago, and it dealt with the issues of the future of urban transportation. There were a number of fascinating speakers there, and what I'm going to speak on particularly was the discussion that was had concerning public right-of-ways. Now, before everyone goes to sleep, what is public right-of-way? It's merely the pavement in the road plus the land on either side of the pavement to 66 feet, which is usually the amount of land that a town takes when it takes land in a subdivision for a road. So there was one speaker there was the Director of Public Works for the City of Minneapolis. Her name was Robin Hutchison. And she talked at length about the fact these public right-of-ways are held in trust for the public, and that it was important that they be managed appropriately for that purpose. And she talked about transportation projects for all people in all ways that they move around. She talked a lot, as did many speakers there, about autonomous vehicles. And I have to confess, autonomous vehicles was not something I have thought about much, other than reading about it the odd time in the paper. But every speaker there, and there could have been 20, spoke about autonomous vehicles like it's tomorrow we're going to see it. Some estimated it would be 10 years, some 5 years. But this Robin Hutchison, she spoke about the need for public right-of-ways, in particular with respect to autonomous vehicles, because she said that we would need fiber optics perhaps in the roads to communicate with autonomous vehicles. We would need spaces in the curbs for these autonomous vehicles to pull over and pick up passengers. We might need curbs to have, I'm going to call it communication devices, it must be optics, fiber optics of some kind, in the curb to communicate with the autonomous vehicles. And everyone spoke about autonomous vehicles as something they didn't quite have their minds around in terms of exactly how it would work, but they gave an example of, let's say, Mr. Mayor, your autonomous vehicle picked you up and dropped you off at your office and went home. And then your autonomous vehicle would be sitting there doing nothing all day. So you might say, oh, you know, Councillor Doherty needs to go somewhere to go pick her up, and then Councillor Comey. And so there could be a sharing of autonomous vehicles, or maybe they're going to be more of a public nature, so that no one will end up owning cars. So after she spoke, and also, you know, others spoke on this topic, they took a few questions after each panel discussion. So I asked a question, and I said, you know, that I was from Collingwood, and we had a lot of developers who were interested in the private road network. And I had reservations about it in any event, but what did she think in terms of her topic on public right-of-ways? And I'll just say she was like horrified that we would be having any public right-of-ways. So it just got me to thinking that, and I won't give all the information, but that as we move forward, I think we have to keep in mind, we don't know what the future's going to bring for transportation. And whether it's 5 years, 10 years, or 30 years, we have to be keeping in mind things are changing. And so I know that our staff is tasked with having a look at private roads and public roads, but I'd ask if they could also keep this in mind. So after the break on this question I asked, interestingly to me, a young woman came up to me and said she was from Collingwood and thanked me for my question. So there are even residents who know what a public right-of-way is and are worried about the future of what we're doing here. So that was all I wanted to report on that. And then the second thing, Mr. Mayor, is I've been approached now 3 times in the last week and a half about conflicts between pedestrians and snowmobilers on our trail network. And I had talked to Director Culver about this earlier in the season and had sort of hoped this issue might go away because the season's almost done. But these 3 people who approached me about this, I wanted to share what their concerns are, and also end with a suggestion that I will meet with Director Culver and come back to our next council meeting with a notice of motion to address how should we address this? Because honestly, I don't know. I think it's a very complicated issue. So I'll just explain very briefly what it is. So on Friday morning, I met with a resident, her and a number of neighbors that had issues with late night traffic and not being able to walk on the trails. Friday afternoon, I received an email from a woman who lives in Balmoral. She's 80 years old. She spoke of being out on the Black Ash Creek the day before, and a snowmobiler came alongside her, and essentially she ended up in the pile of snow on the side of the trail with her little dog sort of upside down. So anyway, she got herself out of there, and of course, I don't know, anyway, she ended up, I don't know particularly this woman's circumstances, but she felt it coming to reach out to a counselor. And then the weekend before, I was on the trail at the north end of Georgian Meadows walking my dog, and I ended up talking to a woman who was walking with her dog, and she went on and on about the issues on that trail for their residents and how a man had almost been hit and how none of the people walk their dogs anymore in Georgian Meadows on these trails. And then she said the town doesn't care, and I said, well, the town does care, I'm part of the town, so I told her as a counselor. Anyway, and then my own circumstance, and this will just take another 30 seconds, I was on the trails with my dog again in the Creekside subdivision a week ago on the weekend, and it's very intimidating when the snowmobiles are roaring up behind you because they do not give any kind of deference to pedestrians. And there were 2 women ahead of me, I could tell, learning how to snowshoe, and they just like jumped off the trail. I did too. I was like, I'm out of here. But I have to say, having said all that, I know some of our best and most, contributing citizens have snowmobiles, and they are gentlemanly on the trails, if I can use that in a non-sexist word. And there's something to be done here between just getting, pedestrians off the trails or getting the snowmobilers off the trails. But I think there's enough conflict going on that we have to come up with a solution to this that will hopefully keep everyone happy. So I spoke to Dean Culver when I was walking, or to Director Culver when I was walking in, and we agreed we would speak further on this with a view to trying to come up with a solution that could come forward as a notice of motion for staff to think further on this and for council's input. So I'll just say if anyone has any thoughts in the meantime, feel free to reach out, and thank you.
Thank you. And I guess to address that, and I'll look to Director Culver if I'm wrong, but my understanding is not all of our trails are open to snowmobiles. There's only specific trails that are open to snowmobiles, which are connecting snowmobile trails, and the rights of way are very firm that the snowmobiles must yield a right of way to any pedestrian or dog. And so if those are issues that are happening, I would ask residents to contact the bylaw and Director Culver to make sure these things are policed properly, and we look forward to the end upshot of your discussions, Councillor Hamlin. And I can tell you that after attending the celebration in Toronto for the Emperor's first birthday in office. The Japanese Consul General Keiko Ito told us that all public transportation vehicles at the 2020 Olympics in Tokyo will be autonomous. They will be finding their way around, and anyone that owns a Tesla knows you can whistle and your car will come to your door. So I think that's happening sooner as opposed to later, and I know from GM's business plan, they are now dedicating their Ottawa plant to autonomous vehicles, and they have over 200 autonomous vehicles navigating around San Francisco because they're told that's the craziest place to drive, so they're educating their cars there. Is there any other business? Councillor Berman.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. Just a quick one that the clerk and I had communicated about today. I had an unsolicited email and then a phone call from somebody that wanted to pitch me an idea about selling the municipality something. I never wanted to speak to them, so I sent them the link to the lobbyist registry, and the clerk informed me that the person registered right away, and I just wondered how much of a success this has been so far. How many people have registered so far off the top of your head? I know it was 2 the first time that it was reported on, but I know it's much more than that now.
We're tabulating the results right now. How are we doing?
Certainly through your worship to members of council, it's actually been quite successful. We get contacted every day with some inquiry about it. And right now we have, I think, 10 that are listed, and we have approximately 2 that are in the hopper. So,
Great, thank you. We're making it easy to do business properly. Any other business? Who would have the bylaw to go in, or the motion to go in camera?
That would be me.
Councillor Madigan.
Moved by me, second by Councillor Berman, whereas the clerk hereby concurs the reasons for going in camera session have been duly reviewed and considered, and the matters are authorized under the exception provisions to conduct a closed session in accordance with the Municipal Act prior to proceeding into closed session. Therefore be it resolved, this council proceeds in camera in order to address a matter pertaining to litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the town or local board, and personnel matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees. Item for discussion are A, Pretty River Estates Phase 2 minutes of settlement, B, Huntingwood Trail Appeal, and C, organizational changes.
Thank you, Councillor Madigan. Any questions or comments before I call the vote? Seeing none, all in favor? That is carried unanimously. There will be a rise and report after today's in-camera session, and we will see you shortly.